Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday everybody, and for anyone living in the Semitic world, a very happy Mid-Autumn Festival. In a surprise announcement during a State Council press event on Thursday this week, China's National Health Commission said that COVID-19 testing would be expanded nationwide to cover all areas, including regions that have no current COVID-19 cases, for the period September 10th, today, through October 31st. Thus covering the Communist Party's National Congress in October and 2 major holiday periods, Mid-Autumn Festival and the National Day holiday in the first week of October. During the 6-week period, people traveling between provinces will need to get tested upon arrival at airports, train stations, highway exits and ports, in addition to being required to present a 48-hour negative test result. As we know, China's outbreak and lockdown situation has deteriorated this week, with dozens of cities and tens of millions of people under lockdown. And, according to Nomura analysts in a research note this week, regions contributing a total of 25% of Chinese GDP have been affected by restrictions. Approximately 16 million of Chengdu's residents remain under an extended lockdown as authorities move to stamp out community cases in the Sichuanese provincial capital. There are also reports in both international and Chinese media that there are communities in locked down Guiyang that are running low on food supplies. During the previously mentioned Thursday announcement, China's National Health Commission spokesperson called the current situation, quote, grave and complex, end quote. This nationwide expansion of testing is obviously yet another sign that officials are getting nervous ahead of the highly sensitive twice-a-decade National Congress. The National Health Commission warned against traveling over this current holiday weekend, and it estimates that 24 million people per day will be ignoring this advice. The health authority also called for large gatherings such as exhibitions and artistic events to be postponed until after October, and that, quote, weddings and funerals should be kept simple with only a small number of people attending, end quote. And of course all these restrictions will not be helping the already poor performing economy. Quote, I expected Beijing to tighten up COVID controls soon to prepare for the Party Congress, but in fact they are tightening up nationwide from now through October 31st. This is not going to help the economy and will once again ruin the October holiday for most people. Between this and the various lockdowns, Q3 and Q4 GDP estimates seem high, end quote. Indeed, the testing alone is already putting up a sizable bill. According to calculations from Yicai, 8 of the largest listed virus testing firms in China reported a combined 14.1 billion yuan or $2 billion increase in accounts receivable as of June 30th, or a gain of 73% year-on-year. With a nationwide rollout of testing now, this bill will only grow. Okay, next up, the economy. If you guys are enjoying this episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. And as always, guys, anyone who wants to go that extra mile and help me continue making China Update for you guys every day, keep the channel financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, guys, thank you so much for the ongoing support. Li Keqiang presided over an executive meeting of the State Council this week, and analysts have observed that the Premier sounded particularly concerned about employment and domestic demand. For those of us who have been watching China Update for some time, this is not surprising to hear. The weekly meeting of China's de facto cabinet announced a series of additional measures to boost employment and try to stimulate demand. The readout mentions the need to give social insurance subsidies to gig workers of technology companies, that is, delivery drivers and others, to give just one example. According to state media, the State Council, quote, decided to extend phased government interest discounts on loans for equipment upgrading in some areas and increase credit support for the service sector to encourage consumption.
and, quote, introduce phased tax reduction policies to encourage enterprises to increase investment, end quote. Youth unemployment at 20%, very high by Chinese standards, is of very serious concern to Beijing too. The State Council committed to providing training subsidies and to extend unemployment insurance to 24 months. Premier Li expressed during the meeting that, quote, insufficient demand is a prominent problem, end quote, and stressed that measures had to be introduced to raise demand. However, the policies that were recommended were primarily for the supply side, and the commitment to increase cheap credit would only work at boosting demand if the issue holding back demand in the first place was insufficient or prohibitively expensive credit, which is not the case at all. Indeed, on the topic of credit, this week the National Bureau of Statistics published the latest official data on so-called total social financing, that is, non-financial sector debt, in the Chinese system. According to the official numbers, total social financing was up by 2.43 trillion RMB in August, slightly above expectations. Both household and business lending came in under expectations, however, confirming suspicions among analysts and other commentators that the two sectors, households and businesses, are reluctant to spend money due to reduced business and household confidence, and that the rise in debt is being driven by local government and state-owned enterprise borrowing. With this August data, total non-financial sector debt is up by an annualized 11.7%, and, as one Beijing-based analyst points out, with such weak GDP growth this year, the rise in this year's debt-to-GDP ratio is likely to be unpleasantly high. Next up for the economy, Bloomberg writes that China's foreign exchange reserves declined for a second straight month to the lowest level since October 2018 as global financial asset prices drop. Data issued by the People's Bank of China this week shows that the reserves decreased to $3.0549 trillion as at the end of August, down almost $50 billion from a month ago. A spokeswoman at the State Administration of Foreign Exchange expressed that the decline was due to drops in asset prices as the dollar strengthened. Quote, China's trade surplus, a key source of foreign exchange, fell to $79.4 billion last month, $21.9 billion less than in July. The drop was mainly led by weaker export growth, which rose at the slowest pace since April as consumers around the world cut back on spending amid soaring inflation and a shift away from pandemic-related goods toward services. End quote. As we discussed yesterday, a smaller trade surplus going forward will continue to weigh on the Chinese currency. Now, let's end by looking at the mortgage boycott situation, and it appears that Zhengzhou, provincial capital of central China's relatively poor Henan province, and where this boycott first achieved infamy, is now leading the way for a more aggressive quasi-nationalization style of measures to deal with the mortgage boycott crisis. In a notice this week, the city government expressed that it will, quote, achieve sustained construction on all suspended property projects in Zhengzhou by October the 6th, end quote. One source speaking to Chinese financial media expressed that real estate firms will be forced to pledge assets to local government-backed financing companies in order to get special loans to have the funds to finish apartments. And they will want to finish these apartments because, as Caixin reports, if they don't, they may be going to prison. Quote, authorities are threatening to rain regulatory pain down on any firm that fails to resume construction or cooperate with the government by the time that deadline arrives. That could include probing the companies and their personnel for embezzling home buyers' funds and prosecuting them for tax evasion. End quote. Local government financing vehicles will acquire stalled projects from the property developers in need of capital, with the vehicles using funds from the 200 billion RMB, $29 billion of special loans extended by state banks and from Zhengzhou's local bailout fund. These are both funds which we have discussed in previous videos. This forced assets for credit is a form of nationalization, But would-be home buyers are probably not complaining, because this at least is probably their best bet at getting a completed apartment. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you all on Monday.